Welcome to True Crime Bites, Death Row and Executions, where we honor lives lost and revisit the final chapters of those who crossed the line. In a matter of days, Curtis Windom will be led from his death row cell and into the execution chamber. The man convicted of a brutal 1992 shooting spree that left 3 people dead and 1 clinging to life is facing the ultimate sentence, over 3 decades after the crimes that shook Orange County to its core. It's been a long road of appeals, legal wrangling, and final chances. But time, as it always does, is running out. And so the question lingers in the humid Florida air. What drove a man to wake up one morning and decide to kill? It was February 7th, 1992, a Friday. Curtis Windom had just heard some news, the kind that makes your blood pressure spike if you're the kind of man who holds grudges. Johnny Lee, a casual acquaintance of Windom's, had scored about $100 at the local dog track. That bit of luck would be unremarkable, if not for the fact that Lee also owed Windom nearly $2,000, a debt that had long gone unpaid. To Windom, that money wasn't just a debt, it was a disrespect. And that morning, Curtis made a vow. To the man who told him about Lee's winnings, Jack Luckett, Curtis didn't mince words. He said plainly, "I'm going to kill him, and you're going to read about it in the papers." Then, calm as a quiet lake, he drove to Walmart, purchased a .38 caliber revolver, and set the day in motion. The cashier who sold him the gun later testified that Windom didn't seem angry, agitated, or nervous. Just calm, collected, like a man going through a to-do list. Shortly after, Windom found Johnny Lee standing by the side of the road talking to 2 women. Windom drove up, pulled out the revolver, and shot Lee twice in the back. Lee collapsed, but it wasn't over. Windom got out of the car and walked toward him, pointed the gun directly at Lee and fired again, this time at close range. One debt paid in blood. But Curtis Windom wasn't finished. What came next was less about money and more about destruction. Fueled by something darker than rage, something colder and more calculated, he ran toward the apartment where his girlfriend, Valerie Davis, and her mother, Mary Lubin, lived. He had lived with Davis off and on. They shared a child. But there was no conversation, no confrontation, no argument. Valerie Davis was shot once in the chest and killed instantly, witnessed by her friend Cassandra Hall, who just arrived and saw the whole thing. Davis never saw it coming. She didn't even have time to scream. On his way out, Windom encountered Kenneth Williams. Windom shot him too, right in the chest from close range. Miraculously, Williams survived. Later, he said Windom looked off, disturbed, not like himself, but deadly. Williams's description of Windom's look is haunting. It makes you wonder, was this just rage, or was there something deeper, a breakdown of a mind pushed beyond the brink? Mental health, trauma, and unchecked anger often weave dangerously together in tragedies like this. Still armed and still not done, Windom fled behind Brown's bar, where several men tried to disarm him. Meanwhile, back at the apartment, someone had called Mary Lubin to tell her that her daughter Valerie had just been shot. She jumped in her car and headed straight home. But fate was cruel. At a stop sign near her house, Windom spotted her vehicle. He approached, leaned in, said something, no one knows what, and then shot her twice. She died where she sat. A mother shot dead minutes after her daughter. 3 lives ended, and 1 was left permanently scarred. All in a single morning. The cold fact is that Windom shot 2 women who were close to him, his girlfriend and her mother, without hesitation, without even a word exchange that we know of. To me, that's a devastating betrayal of trust and love, and it hits home how violence fractures families in the most brutal way. Windom was arrested that same day. In March of 1992, he was formally indicted on 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted first-degree murder. By August, the jury found him guilty on all counts. During the penalty phase, the same jury voted unanimously 12-0 for the death penalty. In November, Judge Dorothy J. Russell made it official. Curtis Windom would die for his crimes. Death for Johnny Lee. Death for Valerie Davis. Death for Mary Lubin. And 22 years in prison for the attempted murder of Kenneth Williams. But the legal process never moves quickly, especially when someone's life is on the line. Over the next 3 decades, Windom filed appeal after appeal. His lawyers argued that the prosecution had unfairly used peremptory strikes during jury selection, possibly excluding jurors based on race. But the Florida Supreme Court didn't agree. They ruled that Windom's defense hadn't made a timely objection or shown that the juror in question was part of a protected racial group. The strike stood. So did the conviction. There was also an issue with a police officer's victim impact statement. The officer had described the emotional impact of the murders not just on the immediate family, but on children in the wider community. The Florida Supreme Court did admit that this testimony had crossed the line. It should have been limited to the victim's uniqueness and the loss to loved ones. But again, because the defense hadn't specifically objected to that portion at trial, the court ruled the issue was procedurally barred. Another door closed. Then came the question of the cold, calculated, and premeditated aggravator, often referred to as CCP. The Florida Supreme Court agreed that the murder of Johnny Lee fit the definition. After all, Windom had planned it, stated his intention, bought the weapon, and carried it out without hesitation. But the murders of Valerie Davis and Mary Lubin, they said, didn't quite meet the same threshold. Still, that didn't matter. Windom had refused to present any mitigating evidence during sentencing, reportedly out of fear that it might reveal his history of drug trafficking. With no mitigating factors to weigh against the brutality of the murders, the aggravator stood tall and unchallenged. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear the case in 1995. Windom tried his luck with a Rule 3.850 motion, a post-conviction relief request in state court. That was denied too. He appealed, and again, the Florida Supreme Court said no. He filed multiple habeas corpus petitions, including one in federal court, which dragged on for years. But each effort brought him no closer to freedom. Decades of appeals, legal battles, and arguments over procedure have done little to bring closure to anyone. It makes me question the balance between a fair legal process and the needs of victims' families waiting for justice. How long should justice wait? Now, more than 30 years since that February morning, Curtis Windom's time is nearly up. To this day, Windom has never publicly expressed remorse, never explained why he killed Valerie Davis, the mother of his child, never said what words he exchanged with Mary Lubin before pulling the trigger, and never apologized to Kenneth Williams, the man he tried to murder in broad daylight. Maybe he will in his final statement, or maybe he won't. Some answers never come. Curtis Windom's silence on why he killed, or remorse for the lives he destroyed, leaves a haunting void. It reminds me that some answers never come, and maybe the hardest part of true crime is facing that uncomfortable silence. The victims left behind shattered families and quiet graves. Johnny Lee never got to spend a cent of his winnings. Valerie Davis left behind a child who would grow up without a mother. Mary Lubin died trying to come home to her daughter. Their names, too often eclipsed by Windom's, deserve to be remembered not for how they died, but for the lives they should have lived. Curtis Windom will soon be put to death by lethal injection, his sentence finally carried out after years of delay. Not everyone is waiting for justice with anticipation. Curtis Windom's daughter, Cortisha, has stepped forward, not to defend her father's actions, but to plead for his life. In a heartfelt statement, she said, "No one in our family wants this execution. We've already lived through the horror of that day, and we've spent the last 33 years trying to heal. I have forgiven my father. My brothers have forgiven my father. We've reached a place of peace with him after years of pain. She went on to say, killing him now will not bring anyone back. It will only reopen deep wounds and take away the closure we've worked so hard to find. This process has been rushed and inconsistent. It has not truly included the people most affected by this tragedy. We're asking the governor, the courts, and anyone who can make a difference to stop this execution and let our families move forward without reliving this trauma all over again. Her words echo a truth not often heard in death penalty cases. Sometimes even those most connected to the crime are not asking for the ultimate punishment. For some, it's justice. For others, it's too late to matter. But for the families of Johnny, Valerie, and Mary, perhaps there is one final measure of peace. Stories like this aren't just crime stats. They're about real people, broken lives, and the ripple effects of violence. Sharing these stories is one way to keep their memories alive and remind us all to look deeper. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime cases just like this one. And let us know your thoughts below. Should executions take decades, or should justice be swifter? Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.